Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Doug Zarkin, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm so excited about our time together. You were kind enough to send me a copy of your book, and I've been so unbelievably enthralled with this. I loved your book, and I want to shamelessly plug it here just a bit. But like we talked about before we hit record, we know that everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it, right?
Yeah.
So with your permission, we'll start with where you were born, go all the way up to today, and then we're going to talk about the book, okay?
Yeah, sure. I'm the product of a unique situation in today's society, which is my parents were happily married throughout my entire childhood until my mom passed away when I was 30.
Wow.
But I grew up originally from Massachusetts. Don't have the accent because at age 2 we moved to New York. So I went from being a Red Sox fan in the crib to being a diehard Yankee fan. Grew
Yeah,
up outside New York City, in Westchester County,
yeah.
where I spent my childhood, went to undergrad down in DC as well as getting my master's, and then decided that, you know what, I wanted to come back to New York.
There you
I
go.
thought coming out of graduate school that I was going to be the next Bud Fox,
Ooh, I love it.
remember vividly interviewing at Lehman Brothers at the World Financial Center,
Yeah.
and my Brooks Brothers navy blue suit, and realized very quickly this is not the world I wanted to be in.
Oh
So
my God.
fortunately, I had an MBA in marketing and decided, you know what, let me get some really good career advice. And this is a time before LinkedIn,
Yeah.
ancient times.
Yeah.
And so where did you get career advice? You got career advice from a good family friend
Right.
who said to me, you know what, if you want to run a business and build a brand, start at the end of the train and work your way to the front.
Really?
And so I started in the agency world, because I figured if I was ever going to be in the front of the train, I wanted to learn all of the roles and functions that went into building a brand.
Right.
Most importantly, speak the language and be able to motivate the people in those roles and functions.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
And, my first career was in the agency world. I spent 10 years, started the youth and entertainment division of Gray, and then became an Avon lady and helped Avon launch their young women's business, Mark. Got poached out of there to go work for limited brands and take a little incubator business called Victoria's Secret Pink and blow that up.
Wow.
Um, Spent a little bit more time in the fashion and beauty world. Then went over to Essilor Luxottica to kind of revitalize their Pearl Vision business.
Yeah.
Took that business to top 7% status on Entrepreneur's 500 list,
Good
and
job.
then decided that I was going to spend my summer writing my first book. And I've never worked harder in my entire life than I did, writing Moving Your Brand Out of the Friend Zone. And then in October of 23, started as the first ever chief brand officer for Good Feet Holdings.
Yeah.
That's where I
And
am
I'm a
today.
Good Feet customer, by the way.
You are
Have
great,
been
great.
have been for decades. Love that company. I was so excited to see that you were the CMO. So let me go back for just a second, if it's okay. I'm gonna
Yeah,
take
sure,
a
take
little
it.
liberty, if that's all right. So growing
Absolutely.
up, what was your favorite thing about growing up in Westchester County?
I lived in a part of Westchester County where, and I lived at a time where you could get on your bike and go meet your friends at the elementary school and play football. And the worst thing that could happen to you was that you didn't keep track of time and your mom or dad pulled up in their car saying, "Where the hell are you?"
Right. Dinner's
Or
ready.
you, yeah,
Right.
dinner's ready. Or you would
Yeah.
hear them screaming out the window, calling your name. And when people call me Douglas, it's like PTSD inducing because the only person who ever called me Douglas is my mom. And
So
I
don't
have
ever call you that.
vivid memories of hearing my name resonate 2 streets away because she
Yeah.
had that thick Boston accent that just
Yep.
carried, and I was like, "Oh, I'm late."
Yeah.
But I would say the best part of growing up was just the fact that, I lived at a time where you can get on your bike and you can go play with your friends and not have to worry.
That's cool, man. Yeah, when you use my first name, my full first name, legal name, and my full middle name, same PTSD, baby. Same
Yeah,
deal.
yeah, yeah,
It's like the hair on the back of my neck stands
for
up, man.
sure,
I know
for
I'm in
sure.
trouble, you know?
You know
It's the
you're in
timeout
trouble.
coming, I'm just sure of it.
Yep, yep.
So, so growing up, so when you went to high school, so as you grew up, who was the most influential person to you growing up?
You know, I would probably say my dad.
Yeah,
My and it's much like the same relationship that I have with my 14-year-old son now. My father was such a driving force in my life. My mom really I'm much more of my mother's son than I am my father's son, but my
right.
dad was definitely a driving force. He had a demeanor about him, an intellect. He always said he was the smartest dumb guy. Everyone thought he had a master's degree. He barely graduated college.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't be embarrassed for me saying it because, I remember just sitting around the table with him, watching Jeopardy, and he'd had 5 minutes of knowledge on everything and, knew how to give driving directions when I started driving before there was Waze or Google Maps. But I would say my dad. My dad's influence on me is probably the greatest, even though I'm much more of a product of my mom than I am my father.
What'd your dad do for a living?
My dad was an executive search consultant.
Oh, there you
I remember him sitting at the table with his briefcase and resumes parsed all over the kitchen table, making phone calls at night, reaching out to candidates.
go.
So he taught me very early on kind of the art of how you present yourself, how you sell yourself, how you market yourself, you know, how to interview, how to ask good questions, and hopefully how to give good answers.
Isn't that amazing, the things
Yeah.
you learn from watching your dad and listening,
Yeah.
you know? I
Yeah.
mean, and it's all through their action. It's through what they did, right? I
I
mean,
mean, I'm a much better tennis player and golfer than he ever was, but you're right. You learn by osmosis.
yeah, it's crazy. Okay, so going to high school, what was your favorite subject in high school?
You know, Interesting. It was philosophy,
Really?
and it was really because we read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance my senior
Yeah,
year,
yeah.
and I got so enthralled with that journey that when I ended up doing my undergrad, I signed up for a philosophy course thinking it was like Philosophy 1. It turned out to be like a junior level course, and I did it my first semester freshman year when I was pledging a fraternity, and
Wow.
I nearly flunked out of it. It was all
Yeah, it's
Plato and
that's
Socrates.
intense.
It was very intense. This was not Zen and the Art of Motorcycle
No, no,
Maintenance.
no, no,
This was
no.
Socrates, Plato. It was very theoretical, and I
Yeah,
was way over my head. But
yeah,
that class I remember vividly being one of probably the most exciting. That and what now they don't call it social studies, but back then they called it social studies.
yeah.
I
I love
loved social studies.
I did too. It was one of my favorite history, one of my favorite subjects, big time.
If the most interesting narratives that exist in society today can be found in a historical book.
Yeah, it's true.
There's nothing that's more interesting or intriguing than history.
Well, and I love how we've learned from a lot of those things, right?
Have we? I
Well, I
you,
mean,
you hope so.
well, I
You
think
hope
we have.
so.
I mean,
Yeah.
I believe you can point to to different lessons we've learned over time, right? And that's why I have a problem with people that are trying to erase history, because if you ignore history, you're bound to repeat it. Somebody
Yeah.
much smarter than me said that one time.
I think what's interesting is you would hope that the intellect inside all of us, whether you are scholarly intelligent or just street smart, you would hope that the intellect inside all of us would teach us that history can teach us a lot about what is to come. Unfortunately, as we're seeing society today, people aren't learning as much about what can be from what was
Yeah.
and taking those life lessons. And it makes being a parent, nevertheless being an adult, an incredibly difficult task in today's
Yeah, it really
society.
does. It
Yeah.
really does. I totally agree. So mine are 23 and 25 now, so I'm past where you're
Oh,
at. And
good. Good.
wow. Yeah, well, when you look back and you're like, okay, right? That happened really
I
fast.
mean, if you want to talk about the hardest job I have in my life, it is not what I do professionally. It's being
Yeah,
the father to a 16-and-a-half-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. I
yeah.
mean, they don't teach that. There is no textbook. Well, there
Amen.
is, but they're not worth the paper they're printed on.
Correct.
If somebody can explain to me how I could have tied a French braid 10 years ago, I would have been a rock star. Could never
Yeah,
figure it out.
yeah,
Every time I looked at it on YouTube, I tied my daughter's hair in a knot. It was kind of funny.
yeah. I'm no good at that either. So in high school, did you play sports?
I did. I played, lacrosse, I swam, wasn't as good an athlete as I had wanted to be, and
Yeah,
part of it is because I just didn't have the work ethic. I
yeah,
think I found that as I look back at my high school career, and it's one of the things that I tried to teach my kids now is there's nothing in the world worse than wasted opportunity. I wasted so many opportunities in my high school years that just made kind of the rest of things harder because I had to work harder and I had to
yeah,
learn how to study. I had to learn that, not opening a textbook and getting an 88 isn't success. I mean,
right.
I faked it for so long
Yeah.
until I realized that I couldn't anymore and I actually had to do. And it was pretty amazing once I started to do what could be possible.
There's some skill involved in that.
There's skill, but there's will. I mean,
Yeah,
you need to have the will. You can get taught the skill. I
yeah,
didn't have the will in high school.
yeah,
I had the skills. I didn't have the will.
yeah,
So, did I want to study for an extra 2 hours to get a 97? No, I would watch television or I'd go out
yeah,
with my friends or I would just do nothing.
yeah,
Um, I had to learn that how to turn that on.
yeah,
And I'd like to think that maybe I've been pretty successful at doing that.
yeah. Sounds like it. I think you have.
Thank
So
you.
you go to college. Why DC and which college did you go to?
So I went to George Washington University,
Okay.
down in DC for my undergrad.
Okay.
GW was not my first choice. It was actually my 11th, if you can
Oh,
believe
really?
it.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
you want to
Okay.
talk about um, having a false sense of yourself. I applied to 11 colleges along with my best friend who went to a different high school, and he got into every one of them and I didn't.
Wow.
And I realized that GW was the right place for me my first day on campus.
Okay.
And I could have transferred, after my junior year, my grades were good enough that I, had opportunities to go to the Ivies, but GW was that amazing mix of social and educational. I loved that college experience. I'm involved with the university today, proud alumnus. But, as I'm guiding my daughter through her college application process, you end up going where you're supposed to end up.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily where you go, it's what you do with it.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. So you ended up getting your master's degree there too, correct?
No, I got an academic fellowship to go to American University, also
Okay.
in DC, different part
Okay.
of DC, and was able to blow through my MBA in 13 months. So
Wow.
I'm the fool sitting in business law my first day in graduate school, still wearing his fraternity letters with all
Wow.
these grown-ups. And when I say grown-ups, maybe they were like 31, 32. They
Right.
were all, government employees that were getting
Yeah.
their MBAs. And here I was, the idiot wearing his champion sweatshirt with his fraternity letters and a baseball hat turned backwards. But I graduated Sunday on the mall at GW, and Monday morning I started graduate school.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Good job.
Yeah.
So you graduate with your master's, bachelor's and master's, right? And
Yep.
you go to Wall Street to
Me.
become the next Bud Fox.
Yep. Yep. Because
Doesn't quite
what
work
what
out.
what product of the 80s and 90s and that what kid didn't want to be, Gordon Gekko or Bud Fox. And
Yeah.
it wasn't that it didn't work out. I realized very quickly
Wasn't for
that
you.
just that the it just wasn't me. It
Yeah.
just wasn't me. Um, just didn't feel right.
Yeah.
It didn't feel right.
So you
It was
so you get your
Go ahead.
first job in marketing. Where's that?
My first job in marketing was as a media planner at Lintos, New York.
Okay. What
One
does a
dag
media
hammer
planner
still
do?
plans media, plans
Okay.
and buys media. So back
Oh,
then
so
it
you're
was,
buying, I got you. So you're buying
yeah,
commercials and that kind of thing.
yeah, television, print. There was no digital back then, so it was
Yeah.
really TV, print, and radio. And so I was responsible for planning and buying on a couple of big accounts: Bacardi, United States Tennis Association, Coca-Cola Foods. Did a little bit of time on GM, I believe, and that was kind of at the very, very end of the agency world,
Gotcha.
sort of the last tip of the spear.
Gotcha. So then you go from there to where?
So I go from there to an executive training program at Saatchi and Saatchi,
Okay.
part of their Kid Connection, which was their business unit focusing on General Mills, Trix,
Okay.
Lucky Charms, Cocoa Puffs.
Yeah.
Worked on all those businesses in
Okay.
account management. From there, I was recruited out to join Gray Advertising as part of their youth task force called Gray 18 and Under.
Okay.
That experience led to the chairman at the time, Ed Meyer, saying, "You guys should start something."
Yeah.
So my boss and I wrote the business plan and started GWiz Youth Entertainment Marketing.
There
We
you
did
go.
all of the marketing for Warner Brothers, Harry Potter,
Wow.
Bravo, W Hotels, Reebok, and that was an opportunity to actually build something from scratch, which was pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
That's awesome. So how long did you do that?
I was at Gray for 7 years. I was at GWiz, I think, for 3.
Right.
So as part of that 7, and then made the decision that I wanted to really focus not just on the what, but the why.
Right.
And so went to Avon,
Okay.
where I started as the director of creative services and marketing for a yet to be named business unit that eventually started the Mark brand,
Right.
which was their young women's business, their high-end young women's business, both an opportunity as buyers, but also to create the new sales force. Ramped that up to about 120 million after about 18 months and got recruited out like the center fielder for the Yankees to go do the same thing for limited brands for their Victoria's Secret Pink business.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So I helped support that business.
Okay.
Just so you know, financially, I help support that business. I have a daughter, right?
It was a great brand. I mean, it still is a great brand. Still is a
Every
great
single
brand.
time, every
Despite
si every
despite
single
the
time we went to the
drama.
mall, we had to go
Yeah.
into Victoria's Secret, and every single time I got in trouble because apparently I can never say no to my daughter.
Well, welcome to that world.
Right.
I live in that as well. It was working for him for Wexner at that time was an incredible education.
Oh, man.
As leaders, we learn as much from the people that mentor us in a positive way, as well as those that try to break us down in a negative way.
What
And
was the number one thing you learned there?
on a positive, I think I learned how to set a floor, like how
Mhm.
to really align a floor and to really think about user flow. Wexner, for all of his faults as a human being, as a leader, was an unbelievable merchant. He
Yeah,
understood the art and science of where to put product on the floor.
yeah,
And that's boded me well in the other businesses that I've gone to work on. That was absolutely the biggest takeaway.
that's cool. So you leave Pink, where do you go?
But I leave Pink and I consult for a year
Mhm.
because I was under a non-compete.
Right.
They wanted me to move to Columbus, and I was my wife and I at the time were trying to get pregnant, and so our family was here in New York.
Yeah,
Spent a year consulting, and then I went to a company called Warnaco,
there you go.
which owned Calvin Klein, Speedo, Warner's, and Olga, which are intimate brands.
Mhm,
Spent about 2 years there as
mhm,
their group vice president of intimates,
okay,
and then from there went to Kellwood to oversee their fast fashion business.
okay,
Baby Fat, Fat Farm, Jolt, XOXO, Vince, and got recruited out of Kellwood by somebody I'd worked with at Limited
mhm,
to be the chief marketing officer for Pearl Vision as part of Essilor-Luxottica.
and
And
that's the
there I
exotic
spent,
little Exotica project.
yeah,
Got
and that's where I spent about 11 years.
right, and took it to new heights, right?
Took it I was fortunate to lead really the evolution of that brand. We went from being a discount drug, 50 buy one, get one free, to the highest quality of care rating in the category. I think the number 37 brand on Entrepreneur's 500, double-digit profitability growth, double-digit exam growth for, like, 8 consecutive years. And I think most importantly, what we did there is we really restored the trust in that iconic brand, not only by consumers, but most importantly by the franchisees themselves.
Yeah, you completely looked at that brand differently by the time you were done. It
Thank
was a
you. Yeah.
complete transformation, it
I
really
I a lot of what I wrote about in the book were lessons that I learned and things that I refined during a decade. I mean, I spent, a third of my professional life there.
yeah,
And I was so grateful I worked with some amazing people. I worked with some less than stellar people.
yeah,
Every one of them left me with a life lesson
yeah,
that has helped me to continue on my leadership journey.
gotcha. So you leave Luxottica, where do you go?
So I left Luxottica and I went to spend the summer, this past summer, writing the book.
Okay,
And then I was recruited into Good Feet Worldwide to become
yeah,
their first ever chief brand officer. Good Feet Worldwide owns the Good Feet store, Stretched, um, ING Source, which produces OS First performance socks, both for running and pickleball and travel. And that's what I'm currently doing now.
yeah, so my good feet story,
But tell me.
from a selfish point of view,
Yeah.
I had foot pain for 20 years. 20 years. And it got to where I couldn't run anymore. I didn't like walking. I wasn't standing because of all the pain I was in. I
Mhm.
went into a good feet store and they said, look, we don't know if we can cure this. We don't know, we hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.